Imagine a city so grand its walls whispered secrets to the sky, a kingdom of gold and power built by hands of stone that shaped a nation for centuries. This was Great Zimbabwe, the heart of an ancient African empire. But then, one day, silence fell. The bustling markets emptied, the royal drums fell quiet, the mighty Mambo left. What force could bring down a civilization seemingly built to last forever? Was it a curse from the ancestors, a land stripped bare, or a kingdom torn apart by its own ambition? Join us as we uncover the forgotten truths, the spiritual whispers, and the tragic choices that led to the silence of the stone birds, the fall of Great Zimbabwe. The City of the Living Stone. The city of Great Zimbabwe was not merely built on the earth, it had grown out of it. The stones, smoothed by generations of careful hands, stood defiant against the endless blue sky, a maze of granite walls that hugged the sacred hill. This was Zimbabwe, the great house of stone, a symbol of power, wealth, and divine favor unmatched in all the lands between the Zambezi and the Limpopo. At the heart of the valley enclosure stood the conical tower, massive and silent, reaching into the heavens like a prayer made manifest. It was here, within these immense walls, that the king Mutinhima held his court. He was the Mambo, the one chosen by the ancestors, whose word was the first rain after the long, dry months. Mambo Mutinhima sat high in the Acropolis, the hill complex, where his private chambers were protected by the spiraling, natural granite fortress. He was a man of great pride, his gaze fixed always on the distant horizon, looking for the trade caravans, bringing precious goods from the ocean, the copper, the cloth, the beads. These were the language of his power. But the Mambo was not the only pillar of the city. Down in the valley, in a humble hut near the ancient burial site, lived Mbuya Nhaka. She was the keeper of the most vital knowledge, the memory of the land, and the voice of the powerful Mondoro spirits. She was old enough to remember when the walls were still being finished, and her loyalty was not to the man Mutinhima, but to the stone itself. And finally, there was Tsoro, the chief builder and commander of the king's guard. Tsoro was a man of action, his hands rough from the granite, his mind sharp with logistics. He was fiercely loyal to the Mambo, but he also watched the fields shrink and the rivers slow with a growing sense of dread. The first warning, the shortening shadow. The trouble began, as it always does, subtly. It was the year of the shortening shadow, 3 seasons since the last truly abundant harvest. Mbuya Nhaka came to the Mambo Mutinhima's court on the Acropolis. She rarely climbed the steep path, for her steps were few, but when she came, even the Mambo's bravest warriors lowered their shields in respect. She did not bow. She looked past the gold and the copper, directly at the Mambo's proud face. "Mambo," she said, her voice dry as the winter grass, "the stones are weeping. The Shiri Yamwari, the soapstone birds, on the tower are looking to the west. They are not pleased." Mutinhima, surrounded by his advisors, shifted impatiently. "Mbuya Nhaka, we have secured the trade routes. The gold flows freely and the Portuguese cloth covers our finest wives. The city is strong. Why do the spirits complain now?" Naka pointed a trembling finger toward the valley. "The spirits do not complain of your trade, Mambo. They complain of your thirst. Look at the valley. The fields stretch far, but the water runs thin. The old pastures are bald. The woodcutters must walk 3 days to bring back a suitable trunk. We have fed the city well, Mambo, but we have starved the soil." This was the first great truth of the decline: resource exhaustion. For centuries, the city had been a hungry mouth, eating the timber for fires, clearing the fields for millet, and grazing thousands of cattle. The land once lush, was now threadbare around the great granite heart. Tsoro stepped forward, his expression grave. Mambo, Mbuyanaka speaks truth. The great trees are gone. We had to dig new wells this season. I propose we send scouting parties far to the north, to the fertile lands of the Zambezi, and begin planning a new satellite capital. The people are too numerous for this dry basin. Mutinhima slammed his fist onto the carved stool. No, I will not abandon the walls built by my fathers. The power is here in the stone. This is where Mwari placed the first spirits. We are not common nomads, Tsoro, chasing rain like wild dogs. I will command the rain to come. The great Zimbabwe will endure forever. The Mambo's arrogance was born of the very strength of the city. How could something so monumental, so perfectly crafted, ever fail? He dismissed both the elder and the builder, choosing to believe in the myth of the stone's eternity. The displeasure of the stone birds. In the ensuing seasons, the drought deepened. The wells, which Tsoro had dug so deep, began to yield only mud. The cattle grew thin, and the laughter of the children, once bright as river pebbles, became scarce. Mambo Mutinhima, facing the spiritual crisis, sought guidance from his high priest. The priest, eager to flatter the king, offered a dangerous solution. Mambo, he whispered, the spirits are angry because we have grown too powerful. We must show our strength. The 7 Shiri Yamwari, the great carved birds that stand on the Acropolis wall, they hold the rain. They are the link to Mwari. If we move them, show them a new place of honor, their hearts will soften and the rain will fall. This was the core of the second great theory, spiritual imbalance and transgression. The soapstone birds were not mere carvings. They were seen as the physical manifestation of the royal ancestors, the link between the Mambo, the people, and Mwari. Moving them was an act of profound spiritual hubris. Tsoro the builder was ordered to supervise the move. He objected vehemently. Mambo, the birds have not moved for centuries. They guard the Acropolis. To disturb them is to invite chaos into the walls. You worry too much about stone, Tsoro, Mutinhima roared. I command you, move 4 of the birds down to the valley enclosure near the conical tower to show the people that Mwari's eye watches them even there. Let the spirit of the ancestors settle among the common men. Tsoro obeyed, his heart heavy. It took 12 strong men and 3 days of painful effort. As the men lowered the 4th bird, its stone base slipped, and the delicate crest on the bird's head cracked, falling to the dust. The moment the crest shattered, the sky, which had been bright and hot, turned an unnerving, sickly green. A low rumble of thunder without rain shook the great walls. Mbuyanhaka felt the moment of transgression from her hut. She rushed to the Acropolis, moving with a speed that startled her attendants. She found Mutinhima at the site of the broken crest, staring at the dust. Mambo, she cried, you have struck the head of the ancestor. You have chased the spirit from the stone. The birds were placed on the highest point for a reason, to look far, to command the wind and to keep the balance. You moved them to boast of your own wealth, to show the traders your power. The spirit has left the stone and the rain will follow it. Mutinhima for the first time looked truly fearful. What is the price, Mambuya? The price is silence, she replied, pointing to the conical tower. The tower that once reached up to Mwari is now only a marker of where Mwari is not. The walls will soon whisper only to themselves. The political cracks and the empty kraal. The crack in the stone bird was matched by the widening crack in the political structure. The decline was no longer hidden. The trade caravans were bringing less gold and more pleas for food. The Shona people from the outer villages, the Vanyai, who once paid homage, began to look for new rising centers of power. Rumors of a new kingdom forming to the north, led by a capable young chief named Nyatsimba Mutota, began to spread like fire. This was the third theory of decline, political conflict and fragmentation. Tsoro, now openly defiant of the Mambo stubbornness, demanded a council. He gathered the key commanders and the remaining wealthy merchants in the great enclosure. "We are losing the people," Tsoro argued passionately. "The people follow the water and the food. Mutota promises fertile land and new pastures. We have the stone, but he has the future. We must move the capital north, where the rivers run full, and establish the king's authority there before Mutota takes it all." Mutinhima appeared clad in his heaviest robes, trying to project immovable power. "You speak treason, Tsoro," the Mambo bellowed. "To abandon this stone is to abandon the ancestors. The new kingdom of Mutota will fail. It lacks the spiritual blessing of these great walls." "The walls do not feed the people, Mambo," Tsoro countered, brave to the point of danger. "The people need strong leadership now. Your father's fathers built this city for prosperity, not for pride. The prosperity is gone. The wealth that flowed here has found a new river, a river that runs north, and the people are following it." Tsoro spoke of the brutal logistical reality. The cost of feeding the elite and the warriors in this barren basin was now greater than the tribute flowing in. The great walls were no longer a fence of protection. They were a prison of depleted resources. Mutinhima, realizing the depth of the defection, did not kill Tsoro. He knew Tsoro spoke the sentiment of the weary leaders, but he could not surrender his pride. "Go then, Tsoro," the Mambo said, his voice quiet, hollow. "Take your warriors, take your merchants, and chase your northern reign. But the true Mambo stays with the stone, for the stone is eternal. May Mwari judge your loyalty." And so, Tsoro and nearly half of the city's population, including the most skilled builders and soldiers, began the slow, painful march north. This was not a chaotic collapse, but a strategic political fracture, a conscious decision to move the seat of power to a more viable economic location. They did not destroy Great Zimbabwe, they simply abandoned its function. The failed festival and the final decree. 2 cycles passed after the departure of Tsoro's faction. The city was now a haunted giant. The valley enclosure was rarely used. The trade routes were silent. The remaining loyalists in the Acropolis were gaunt, sustained by the last of the stored grain. Mambo Mutinhima, desperate for a sign, commanded the Great Rain Festival, the ritual that had sustained the city for generations, to be held. He believed that if Mwari saw the people gathered, united in prayer, the divine favor would return. The festival was a disaster. The dancers were weak, their movements slow. The ceremonial cattle were few and scrawny. When the high priest appealed to the heavens, the sky remained fiercely, cruelly clear. The drought mocked their reverence. Then disaster struck the kraal. The remaining herd of royal cattle, too weak to resist, stampeded, trampling the last of the young millet that had been painstakingly grown in the valley floor. The kraal, the symbol of their wealth, was left empty and broken. Mbuyanhaka arrived at the Acropolis one last time. She found Mambo Mutinhima alone, seated on his throne, his magnificent robes hanging loosely on his thin frame. He was staring at the conical tower, now silent and solemn in the distance. "Mambo," she said softly, "the time is over. The spirit has flown, the stone is tired. The purpose of this city was to gather and protect the people. Now the stone threatens them. We must follow the wisdom of the great transition." She explained the ancient wisdom. The power of a ruler is not in the place, but in the people. The people, she said, were the true Zimbabwe. The people must move, they must go to the full rivers, they must feed themselves, and when they are strong, they will remember the stone. The stone is not falling, Mambo, it is resting. Mutinhima wept, tears cutting paths through the dust on his cheeks. He finally saw the monumental truth. His pride had nearly destroyed his people. He had ignored the ecology, starved the soil, defied the spirit, broke the crest, and alienated the politics, chased the future. All three reasons were one. He stood up looking at the silent, unwavering granite walls. He issued his final decree. The great Zimbabwe is to be abandoned. The silence of the stone birds. The exodus was not a rout of terrified subjects, but a slow, reverent process of transition. Mutinhima, having shed his arrogance, led his remaining loyalists. First, they gathered the remaining Shiriyamwari. They wrapped the 4 moved birds and the 3 remaining birds still on the wall in sacred cloth. These ancestral symbols were not left behind. They were carefully carried north toward the new lands of the Zambezi, ensuring the spiritual lineage of the Mambo followed the people. This was the final symbolic act of transition. The spirit of Great Zimbabwe was moving. Tawanda, one of the last remaining builders, led the final preparations. They did not destroy the city. They ritually cleaned the floor of the great enclosure, covered the ritual pits, and sealed the entrance to the conical tower with heavy stones, marking it as a sacred tomb, not a ruin. Mbuya Nhaka was the last to leave. She stood in the great enclosure, the sun setting on the magnificent curve of the outer wall. The city, now empty, seemed to hold its breath. "Speak to us, stone," she whispered. "Tell us why you allowed us to leave." The silence of the granite was her answer. The stone did not need to speak. It was finished with its work. It had created a nation, focused its power, and now its lesson was complete. Mbuyanhaka turned and walked through the main exit, her shawl pulled tight around her shoulders. She did not look back. The story of the fall of Great Zimbabwe, as told by the Shona ancestors, is not a tale of military defeat or sudden catastrophe. It is a story of choice and wisdom. The ancestors chose to preserve their people over their palace. They realized that power is not contained in granite, but flows with the river and resides in the heart of the community. They left behind the most magnificent enigma in all of southern Africa, the immense, silent walls of Great Zimbabwe, still standing defiant, asking the eternal question to every generation. Why? And the answer, preserved in the oral history, is because it was time. The city had served its purpose, and the Mambo was wise enough in the end to listen to the whispers of the dying soil and the silent guiding spirits. The people moved north, and the spirit of Zimbabwe went with them, carried in the sacred, wrapped Shiriyamwari, ready to build the next great empire.